Joining me now from the Show Me Institute, another good friend of mine, although I agree with him a lot more, is Patrick Tuohey. Hey, Patrick, hope you had a happy Thanksgiving.
I did. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great.
I was afraid at the top of the segment talking about country music, the radio station had changed formats, so with the commercial.
No, we're trying to keep it between the ditches here. So, so Patrick, what's the latest government boondoggle that you and the folks at the Show Me Institute have your eyes on these days?
Well, so Kansas City has been talking for a long time about conducting a study to demonstrate how effective economic development spending, all the subsidies downtown, the streetcar, all that stuff, how effective that's been. What makes the hair on the back of my neck go up is the politicians here talk about it in terms of, we don't talk about how much good all these subsidies do enough, and that doesn't sound like a legitimate study. St. Louis did commission, the St. Louis Economic Development Commission did actually commission a bunch of auditors to come in and look at the effectiveness, and their own report says we haven't gotten a lot of good for the money we've been spending. And that's not Show Me Institute research, that's not Cato Institute research, that is the St. Louis Development Corporation's own internal research.
Patrick, did they bury that in like a 20-foot hole and not tell anybody about it?
I'll tell you this, the study came out in May, I asked my colleagues who found it the same question. He said they didn't really bury it, but they didn't promote it either.
I guess not.
That, good for them for doing the research, but now it's a matter of do they follow up?
Right. So Patrick, I've noticed this over the last decade or so that I've been really heavily involved in politics and public policy. When we got great institutions like the Show Me Institute who basically have one philosophy on economic development and growth and all that. But then you've got all these civic, I say quote unquote, civic organizations like RCGA. And you all, I know over in Kansas City, you've got what over there? What's it called?
Well, the Kansas Policy Institute works on the Kansas side of the state, of course.
Yes.
Or the Kansas,
there's
within the Kansas.
Something in Kansas City as well. And all these civic progress kinds of organizations, when are they going to get with the program of I never hear them talk about right to work. I never hear them talk about tax cuts. I never hear them talk about spending reforms. I never hear them talk about tax credit reform, welfare reform. It's just all this it's either feel good, mushy stuff or it's like more taxpayer subsidies. That seems to be their programs.
Grover Norquist wrote a book called, I think, Leave Us Alone, and where he talked about kind of conservatives just want to pay our taxes and be left alone. We don't want services from government. But he also characterized the left as wanting things from the government. So if that's true, on the left you have kind of civic organizations, but they're all looking for dollars. And so I think what happens is they're willing to look the other way when another organization wastes a bunch of money because they're in line, and they don't want to criticize other people's spending. They don't want to weaken the chances that they'll get, a contract or something. And so what happens is well-meaning taxpayers who absolutely want to fight crime and provide for children and build roads end up saying yes to these promises, and they raise their sales taxes, but the problems never get solved. And so that's the problem. We're spending an awful lot of money, especially here in Jackson County and Kansas City. Our taxes are very high, but we're not getting any. One could easily argue we're not getting much for it. But then do you want to come out and say, I don't think we should pay a sales tax for crime prevention when crime prevention is so desperately needed?
Exactly. So we're speaking to Patrick Tuohey from the Show Me Institute, at Show Me. And Patrick, your Twitter handle is your name, right? It's at Patrick Tuohey. Is that right? Okay.
That's
at
right.
Patrick Tuohey. So Patrick, Missouri also was a beneficiary of the red tsunami that washed across the country. And for the first time in a long time, we have top to bottom Republican executives running the state, that will be running the state come January, along with our remaining supermajority in the House and the Senate. First of all, let me ask you this. Do you have some hope that we might finally dig ourselves out of being 47th in GDP growth by having some new ideas come from the executive branch? And number two, what would you like to see? If you had a magic wand, what policy positions would you like the legislature to pursue?
Oh, wow, that's quite a question.
Yes.
Yes, I am optimistic that a lot of the good ideas from the legislature will have a chance to pass through the executive, but you know better than I, legislatures have all sorts of good ideas and bad. And so I think we need to keep an eye on our politicians, regardless of party, to make sure that they're being responsible. I think one of the things that's most exciting, the opportunities, is really getting in some tax reform in Missouri. You know that all the states around us almost are outperforming us, if not all. And of course, Missouri lost a House seat to redistricting because we're not growing as fast as our neighbors. So if we want to be competitive, and if we want to better serve our population, I think a tax reform that lowers taxes for everybody rather than just the select few.
Excellent. Very good. And federal government. I know you all focus mainly on Missouri, but there's a lot of things the federal government has done to us over the last few years that has affected Missouri quite deeply. And one of those is Obamacare. Have you looked at Obamacare at all, or what it during the campaign? Of course, the one side's going to say, and everybody says this, we're going to repeal it, and the other side says don't. And then now it's kind of like Trump saying, well, I'm going to repeal parts of it and keep. What would you advise lawmakers to do on Obamacare? And then on the state level, would you like the federal government to block grant Medicaid dollars to the state so the state can manage them?
I don't know that we've done a lot of research specifically on block granting to that program, but absolutely, I think the federal government can do a lot of things that amount more to getting out of the way rather than doing the job for the American people. Missouri is losing a number, or may be losing a number of healthcare providers because, just as has happened around the country, they're looking at Obamacare, the reality of it, and it's not as financially attractive to them. And so, it's important for the people of Missouri and all over that they have competition. But if your county only has one provider, or even if it has two providers, that invites the temptation for them to keep from being competitive with one another, and so the consumer has fewer choices.
Absolutely.
And that's something that really has to be kept an eye on, because if we don't have competition in insurance, there's no pressure downward on prices.
You're absolutely right. That's something exactly what you just said was something Senator Roy Blunt was really keying in on. Obamacare was supposed to be the great panacea, and it's been really bad medicine for the healthcare industry as a whole. So, hey, Patrick, folks want to find out more about the topics we discussed today about taxpayer-funded boondoggles and so forth and the other. What is the website again?
They can find us at showmeinstitute.org and go to our blog, and we write about these topics and a lot more.
And I know you have a couple of very interesting. You all never take a break there. You're always at it, and I know you've got some great speakers and forums. You always have. You have breakfast meetings. You've got evening events. Something for everybody. And I love how you're expanding across the state. So we've been with Patrick Tuohey of the Show Me Institute. Patrick, have a great Thanksgiving Day weekend, and best to you and your family. And I know we'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks so much, Tim. Take care.
Excellent. Patrick Tuohey from the Show Me Institute, at Show Me or at Patrick Tuohey, showmeinstitute.org. Tim